Today, I'm going to start reading Helen Schucman's wonderful poem called "The Gifts of God," and a book of poetry of her poetry that was dictated through Jesus, just like A Course in Miracles was published after she passed. She passed in 1981, and the book came out in 1982. And this is a prose poem with 5 parts. The part we're going to read today is called The Dream of Fear, and the other parts are the 2 gifts, the ending of the dream, our gift to God, and the Father's love. And these were all scribed at different times, all these 5 different parts. At the end of this video, I'll read you a little something about how this poem came into being. This is the last thing, apparently, that Helen ever scribed before she passed. And some have called it a Course in Miracles, a miniature. It's a miniature Course in Miracles. So let's see. And we're going to read the first part, like I said, the Dream of Fear, and we'll talk a little bit about it. So here we go. The Dream of Fear from The Gifts of God, from Helen's, this is Helen's poem, The Gifts of God. The Dream of Fear. Fear is the one emotion of the world. Its forms are many. Call them what you will, but it is one in content. Never far, even in form, from what its purpose is, never with power to escape its cause, and never but a counterfeit of joy. It rests uncertainly upon a bed of lies. Here it was born and sheltered by its seeming comfort. Here it will remain where it was born, and where its end will come. For here is nothingness, where neither birth nor death is real, nor any form in the misshapen mind that spawned its seeming life has any meaning in the mind of God. If you were certain, wholly sure and with consistent grasp of what the world can give, fear would be laid aside as easily as joy and peace unite on love's behalf. But first there must be certainty that there can be no love where fear exists, and that the world will never give a gift which is not made of fear, concealed perhaps, but which is surely present somewhere in the gift. Accept it not, and you will understand a gift far greater has been given you. Let not the world deceive you. It was made to be deception, yet its snares can be so easily escaped a little child can walk through safely and without a care that would arrest its progress. Dreams are dreams, and every one is equally untrue. This is the only lesson to be learned. Yet will fear linger until every one is recognized as nothingness and seen exactly as it is and nothing more. There is no person, thing, or circumstance that you can value as your own without the, quote, gift, unquote, of fear arising in your heart. For you have seen them all as they are not, and love for them has fled as if from you. And you will think that God has ceased to care for you who have betrayed the Son he loves and chosen fear and guilt in place of him. Does God deceive, or does the world? For it is sure that one must be. There is no point at which their thoughts agree. Their gifts unite in kind or purpose. What you take from one, the other will obscure. There is no hope of compromise in this, nor can there be a shifting of the mind between the two without the fear that every dream must bring. How fearful it must be to see yourself a maker of reality and truth, the Lord of destiny and time's domain, an arbiter appointed for the world. Dreams never change. Remember only this, but do not let it slip away at times and let yourself give way to fear again. Deny the dream, but do not fail the truth, for only what is true will never fail. All else deceives. All else will terrify, and even when it seems to please the most, it brings with it a heavy cost of pain. Be free of suffering now. There is no cost for any gift that comes to you from God. His way is certain, for his gifts remain forever as he gave them. Do not think that fear can enter where his gifts abide. But do not think gifts can be received where fear has entered and has touched your sight with gross distortions that the world thinks real. There are no scraps of dreams. Each one contains the whole of fear, the opposite of love, the hell that hides the memory of God, the crucifixion of his holy Son. Therefore be vigilant against them all, for in their single purpose they are one, and hell is total. It could seem to take forever for this lesson to be learned, and yet it need not be. I come to speak in time of timelessness. Have you not learned the pain of dreaming yet? There is no need to hug it to your heart and to forget the dreadful cost of salvaging despair and building up deceptions once again. The tiniest of dreams, the smallest wish for values of the world, is large enough to stand between you and the sweet release that God would offer you. He cannot choose to change his Son, nor make your mind accept the perfect freedom he has given you. Yet it is certain you will turn to him and suddenly remember. But be sure of this and do not let it slip away. What God has joined is one. And one as well is everything that fear has made to be the great deceiver and the substitute for God's creation. You can choose but one, and which you choose is total. Everything the world can offer promises some joy that it will never give. And everything that God has promised you will never fail in anything. No need will be unmet, no hurt unhealed, no sorrow kept unchanged, no darkness undispelled. The smallest pain will vanish suddenly before his gifts. An unremembered world will leave no trace behind its going when God's gifts have been accepted as the only things you want. Choose once again is still your only hope. Darkness cannot conceal the gifts of God unless you want it so. In peace I come and urge you now to make an end to time and step into eternity with me. There will not be a change that eyes can see, nor will you disappear from things of time. But you will hold my hand as you return, because we come together. Now the hosts of heaven come with us to sweep away all vestiges of dreams and every thought that rests on nothingness. How dear are you to God, who asks but that you walk with me and bring his light into a sickened world which fear has drained of love and life and hope. Surely you will not fail to hear my call, for I have never failed to hear your cries of pain and grief, and I have come to save and to redeem the world at last from fear. It never was, nor is, nor yet will be what you imagine. Let me see for you and judge for you what you would look upon. When you have seen with me but once, you would no longer value any fearful thing at cost of glory and the peace of God. This is my offering, a quiet world with gentle ordering and kindly thought, alive with hope and radiant in joy, without the smallest bitterness of fear upon its loveliness. Accept this now, for I have waited long to give this gift to you. I offer it in place of fear and all the, quote, gifts, unquote, that fear has given you. Can you choose otherwise when all the world is standing breathless, waiting on your choice? Come now to me and we will go to God. There is no way that we can go alone. But when we come together, there can be no way in which the word of God can fail. For his the word that makes us one in him, and mine the voice that speaks this word to you. And that's the end of that section, of the first section, which is the dream of fear. We can just maybe go through each paragraph a little bit. I'm not going to read everything again, but obviously this is all about fear, the one emotion of the world. The world is based in fear. It's based, and fear is the ego, the whole ego's thought system. It doesn't mention the ego here, actually, but fear takes many forms. Remember, this is for Helen. This, in a way, this message was from Jesus to Helen. Jesus is calling Helen to not give in to the fear anymore, right? To just abide in peace, to rest in peace. Fears of the world. Fear is nothing. Just as the world is an illusion, fear is an illusion. Fear is nothing. It's nothingness. In the mind of God, there's no fear, right? There's only love. That's the first paragraph, something like that, okay? But it takes many forms in this world, right? Be not deceived, he says. you could give up fear easily if you understood that love is everything. Everything the world has to offer is a fearful thing, right? It might not look like that on the surface, but it will come to that in the end. So don't put any stock in the things of this world. Anything that changes, is impermanent, is not real. And you may be deceived. So Jesus says, let not the world deceive you. You may be deceived, but don't be deceived. This world was made as deception, right? This world was made to hide the truth of what we are. But it can easily be, Jesus has this line, yet its snares can be so easily escaped, a little child can walk through safely and without a care that would arrest its progress. So even a little child can go beyond the deception. Maybe only a little child can see through the deception. All dreams are untrue. You think that God, when you're in the fear, you think that there is no God. Where's God? But does God deceive, or does the world deceive? There's no compromise. There's either the love of God, or you're gonna accept the fear, and you're gonna be deceived by the fear. You can't have both at the same time, right? So you have to learn to give up one, and that would be the fear, because the fear is not what we want, right? There is no hope of compromise in this, nor can there be a shifting of the mind between the two without the fear that every dream must bring. Dreams never change. Truth will never fail. All else deceives. All else will terrify, and even when it seems to please the most, it brings with it a heavy cost of pain. Be free of suffering now, right? You can be free of suffering now. God's gifts are eternal. They are forever. The gift, the word gift in German, I've pointed this out before, means poison, right? So the gift of fear, which is the ego's gift, is poison, right? But God's gifts are not. God's gifts are presence, right? The gift of presence. So there's no order of difficulty in miracles, and you don't want to accept any fear, right? Don't be deceived at all. I come to speak in time of timelessness. Have you not learned the pain of dreaming yet? Right? Don't you recognize that nothing in this world has satisfied you, right? It has only brought you pain and misery and suffering. Don't value anything of this world, right? Whatever you choose is going to be real for you. So if you choose the fear, it's going to be very real. If you choose God, if you choose the love of God, that will be the reality. Choose once again. It's funny that, not funny, but it's interesting that Jesus actually he puts in quotes, choose once again. So he's reminding Helen of her, actually one of her favorite passages at the end of the text is this passage called Choose Once Again. And this is one of Helen's favorite passages because it's a very beautiful passage. So Jesus says, choose once again is still your only hope. Darkness cannot conceal the gifts of God unless you want it so. In peace I come and urge you now to make an end of time and step into eternity with me. This is Jesus calling to Helen. He's calling to all of us. Helen is all of us. But this is also specifically for Helen. Right. How dear are you to God, who asks but you walk with me and bring his light into a sickened world which fear has drained of hope and life and hope, of love and life and hope. Surely you not failed to hear my call, for I have never failed to hear your cries of pain and grief. Let me see for you and judge for you what you would look upon. When you have seen with me but once, you would no longer value any fearful thing at cost of glory and the peace of God. This is my offering, a quiet world with gentle ordering and kindly thought, alive with hope and radiant in joy, without the smallest bitterness of fear upon its loveliness. Accept this now, for I have waited long to give this gift to you. I offer it in place of fear and all the, quote, gifts, unquote, that fear has given you. Can you choose otherwise when all this world is standing breathless, waiting on your choice? Come now to me and we will go to God. So Jesus is calling Helen to the real world, right? And then they will go beyond the real world. The real world is the redeemed world. The real world is where everything is shining, and there's still, a world, but they're going to go beyond. Then that will disappear, and they will return home to God. But when we come together, there can be no way in which the word of God can fail. For his the word that makes us one in him, and mine the voice that speaks this word to you. And that's the end of that section. So it's beautiful. It's maybe more prose than poetry, but it's called a prose poem. So this is what Ken, in his book, The Absence from Felicity, this is Ken Wapnick's biography of Helen that he wrote after Helen had passed. He talks specifically about this poem, and he says that this poem was not written for him, but it wasn't written for Ken, but it was inspired by something that happened between Ken and Helen. And he says, while it was not written for me, I was certainly the direct stimulus for it. Probably more than any other of the scribed material, this wonderful piece illustrates how something quite beautiful and inspiring can come from an almost hopeless ego situation. This was the circumstance of its origin. Once a month, early Sunday morning, I traveled by train to Ossining in northern Westchester County to spend a day and a half at the Maryknoll Cloister. This was a small community of cloistered nuns whom I met with individually as well as addressed as a group. I was always back in New York early Monday afternoon. For this one particular Sunday, which was February 8th, 1978, the weather forecast was for a blizzard to begin later that morning and to continue on through the day and into the evening. I have already mentioned Helen's dependency on me, which would become greatly exacerbated whenever I would be out of my apartment and not with her. To alleviate her anxiety and perennial fears that I would never return, I would call her regularly and also supply her with the telephone numbers where I could be reached. Helen thus became frantic with anticipation of my almost certain demise in the blizzard and asked me not to go. However, as I had canceled the previous weekend upon Helen's request, I did not feel I should do so again. I tried to assure Helen that since the storm was not expected to hit New York until after I arrived at Maryknoll, there was nothing to fear. I would be well taken care of and would be sure to return safely on Monday. That seemed to relieve some of Helen's anxiety, at least temporarily. But then later that Sunday morning, as predicted, the snow began to fall and fall and fall. Helen's anxiety seemed to extend beyond her considerably extended boundaries, and I called frequently during the day and evening, and Helen called in between my calls. She was absolutely beside herself with worry. I continued to reassure her that the sisters were taking very good care of me. I had lots to eat, and the cloister was warm, and I would be home the next day. But to no avail. And then, to compound the situation, the switchboard shut off at 10 p.m., which meant there was no possible communication between us until morning. I can only imagine Helen's anxiety at that point, and yet at what was probably its height, there was obviously another part of her mind that asked for help and allowed a different message to come through her from Jesus. Sometime late that evening began the gifts of God, which essentially contrasts the ego's gifts of fear with God's gifts of love. The first section was the dream of fear, followed the next morning by the two gifts. Both were personal messages from Jesus and were specifically aimed at helping Helen choose against her fear, saying in effect, turn over to me all your gifts of fear, your fearful dreams, and I will exchange them for the peace of God, his gifts. Unfortunately, these wonderful messages had no observable effect on Helen. I left Maryknoll later Monday morning, and it took me over 7 hours to return as train service had been adversely affected by the storm. By the time I arrived at Helen's apartment around 7 p.m., she was a nervous wreck, but obviously relieved to see me and alive and well at that. The crisis was now over, but 2 days later, Helen picked up the writing where she had left off, and then he just says that she kept scribing, and over the course of the next several months, the next few sections of the poem came into being. Maybe I'll read more about that in the next video, but that's all for today for this. We're gonna just keep going with this poem over the next 5 days. We'll read all 5 parts in the next 5 days. Thank you so much for listening. Hope this was helpful to you, and see you very soon. Thank you.